guys, welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. This week we've got a really interesting one with a very creepy voicemail. This is the case of Henry Mccabe. Now Henry was a 32-year-old Liberian immigrant living in Mounds View, Minnesota in the USA. He was quite prominent in his community and he worked as a state auditor for the Minnesota Department of Revenue. By all accounts, he had quite a happy life. He had a good job, a good house, a wife and 2 daughters. However, recently his life had begun to take a little bit of a downturn. He's got a negative review at work, which I think he took quite badly. And also rumour has it that him and his wife were actually separated at the time that he disappeared, and that a rent check on his house had bounced. Now, I'm not entirely sure how true those last 2 points are. They're just sort of things I read in a few different articles and seen in different newscasts. But there's not actually anything to back up the fact that him and his wife were separated. But what I can tell you for certain is at the time that Henry disappeared, his wife Corinne and their 2 daughters were actually not in Minnesota. They're in California visiting grandparents. So it's September 7th, 2015, a Sunday night, and Henry's at home alone, and he decides to go out drinking. He goes out with 2 friends, a Calvin Johnson and William Porpoise Kennedy. He's referred to as Porpoise in quite a lot of the articles, but I'm not actually entirely sure I'm pronouncing that right, so I'm just going to refer to him in this video as William because I don't want to keep butchering that name. Together they go to a bar called Povlitsky's, which is actually now shut down. Now Henry starts drinking, but he doesn't stop. He gets completely wasted. Now I'd actually be really interested to know if this was something that Henry did often or if this was kind of a one-off event. Because if he went out often and got this drunk, then it wouldn't be so much of a massive deal. But if this was like a one-off time, he just got this drunk that one night, maybe because things were going quite badly in his life, then it sort of makes a different twist on the story. Now at some point in the night, Henry was actually so drunk that his friends decided to take his keys and his wallet off him. Now from what I gather, Henry hadn't actually driven to the club, so I don't think him driving home from the club was the issue here. I think his friends were just worried that he would lose his keys. However, they took his wallet off him so he couldn't buy any more drinks. That is how bad he got. All Henry actually had on him was his phone, and towards the end of the night, Henry actually gets in William's car and William offers to drive Henry home. However, Henry says that he doesn't want to get dropped home. He says that he wants to get dropped off at a gas station nearby. Now according to William, this would have been around 2 AM that he dropped Henry off at this gas station. William said that he dropped Henry off at a gas station near his home called the Super America gas station. However, this is very strange because Henry's house is actually in the complete opposite direction of this place, and it later came out that this gas station, the Super America station, wasn't even the one where he dropped Henry off. So there are 3 reasons that I could think of as to why Henry would want to get dropped off home and he'd want to be dropped off at a gas station instead. Number 1 is that he was depressed, having a hard time, and he wanted to sort of like go for a walk and clear his head a little bit. Now doing this at 2 AM when you are absolutely off your face drunk seems a little bit strange, but when you're drunk you don't really tend to think straight anyway, so maybe it isn't that strange. Or he was so drunk that he just wasn't thinking clearly. I can say from personal experience, I've been in taxis home with friends and they've been like, oh, just drop me off here. And I've been like, you don't live anywhere near here, like we're gonna take you home. And they've been so insistent, like, no, I can walk from here. I think when somebody's drunk, they don't always make the most logical decisions. So maybe it was just like my friends have done in the past, and be like, oh, just drop me here, it's fine, I'll walk home. Or just like, oh, this is really close to my house, even if it's nowhere near. Or another option is that Henry was just really drunk and knew he was really drunk and knew if he went home then he just wouldn't be able to sleep, so he just wanted to get dropped off so he could walk home and sort of walk the alcohol off before he went to bed. Or a lot of people speculate that maybe Henry wanted to get dropped off at this particular gas station because he planned to meet somebody. Now of course, as you probably expect, Henry doesn't turn up for work the next morning. Now Henry getting dropped off is the last time that anyone ever sees him, but it's not the last time that he's heard from. Henry's wife Corinne reports the next day that she'd received a very strange call from Henry at 2:23 AM that morning, so about 23 minutes after he'd been dropped off. Corinne said that it sounded like an accidental dial. Henry hadn't meant to call her, but what she heard chilled her to the bone. She later said in an interview it sounded like he was outside and that he was walking. At the end of the call, it sounded like he had maybe been injured. It sounded like he cried out. So Corinne's obviously very concerned about this. She doesn't know what to do. She's in California, so pretty much the other side of the country, And so she tries to call Henry's brother. Now this is where a lot of confusion in this case seems to come from. There's a voicemail and everyone's always been like, well, if Corinne said that Henry called her and she answered, how was there a voicemail? Because Henry eventually hung up, Corinne tried to call him back and there was no answer. The line was completely dead. But what I think makes most sense in this is that Corinne has tried to conference call in Henry's brother Tim, who also lives in Minnesota, obviously thinking if Henry's in trouble, Tim can get there. But obviously it's like 2:30 a.m, Tim's asleep. But what happens, because Tim doesn't answer, he gets the voicemail. So the voicemail he receives was also heard by Corinne. This voicemail is about 2 minutes long. However, it is nowhere on the internet. I have searched high and low. I think a lot of other people have tried to search as well, and it's just nowhere. The only sort of clip I can find is only about 20 seconds long, I think. I'm going to put it in now. It's part of a newscast. There's a news reporter speaking over it. But you can kind of get the gist of how creepy and terrifying this voicemail is.
It's a voicemail unlike anything you've ever heard before. There are 2 minutes worth of noises, bizarre ones, but very little actual talking.
Now what's really weird is there are actually people on the internet who are insistent that they have heard that full voicemail. They've heard the whole 2 minutes, and for some reason it's just disappeared from the internet. It was taken down and nobody has ever been able to find it again, which I just find a really creepy detail of this case. But obviously you've just heard the voicemail, you heard what it was, so I'll be really intrigued to know what you guys actually think about it. It's very creepy because it's sort of that low, guttural, groaning, growling sound that sounds like some kind of animal maybe. A lot of people speculate that it's something out of this world, an alien, or a lot of people speculate Bigfoot. Obviously there are a lot of different people saying a lot of different things about this voicemail. Now Corinne later said that Henry said on the phone to her that he had been shot, and obviously this really concerned her. That's part of the reason why she tried to conference call Tim in. And she also said that at the end of the call it just goes completely quiet. Henry stops groaning, whatever is in the background stops the growling, and then a voice just says stop it before hanging up. And a lot of this case has been based around that voice saying stop it. A lot of people say it was Henry himself saying it. A lot of people speculate there was somebody else. However, because this clip hasn't been released or because it was taken down from the internet, nobody can sort of do anything about it. I think the authorities' best chance in this case is releasing that voice and maybe somebody will recognise it, but they just haven't for some reason. Obviously Tim wakes up the next morning, hears that voicemail, freaks out, tries to get hold of Henry and can't, and so immediately calls the police. He files a missing persons report with the Mounds View Police Department, and so the investigation into Henry's disappearance starts. The police question the friends who were with him that night and sort of confirm the timeline of events. William says that he dropped Henry off at the Super America gas station, and so police of course get the CCTV from this gas station and review it. However, at no point does it show William dropping Henry off there. Like, without a doubt, Henry was not at that gas station. And immediately this throws William into the spotlight. He becomes a very big suspect in this case because why would he lie about that? Eventually it just came out that William had remembered the wrong gas station. Now I don't know if William had been drinking that night, you'd hope not considering he was driving, but I suppose you never know. But even if he wasn't drinking, it was still early in the morning and he was probably very tired. Police started to review the CCTV from different gas stations in the area, and eventually came out that William had dropped Henry off at the Holiday gas station just off of Central Avenue. Did William lie about this on purpose, or did he genuinely get confused? To be honest, I don't see any reason why he would purposely lie about it. Like, of course they were going to find out eventually, it's a police investigation, so I'm more inclined to believe that he just genuinely got a bit confused here, but of course let me know what you think. The confusing thing here is the two aren't even in slightly similar areas. They're 5 miles apart. That's like a 12-minute drive in completely different directions. So it's just very strange. Police looked into Henry's phone records and the last pings from his phone came from the vicinity of Creek View Park at around the time of the call to his wife, so about 2:20, 2:30 a.m. However, Creek View Park was a 48-minute walk from the Holiday gas station. So if Henry was dropped at the gas station at 2 a.m, how did he walk 48 minutes away in just 23 minutes? Even if he ran that sober, he would struggle, but he was really drunk, so I can't imagine even if he was running, he would ever make that in 23 minutes. The only logical explanation is that somebody picked him up and drove him there. Or the timings have been confused here, which is probably more likely. All we've got from the news articles is William saying that he dropped Henry off at around 2 a.m. However, we don't actually know what time the police saw on the CCTV footage. So if it was earlier, if he dropped Henry off at maybe 1:45, then this is totally possible that Henry probably could have made it in about that time. Shortly after the investigation started, a $10,000 reward was offered by the Minnesota Community Police. Now this is a non-profit group, they're not the actual police, they're like a charity who help out with sort of like community issues. So they came forward offering a $10,000 reward for any information that would lead to the discovery of Henry. However, they soon retracted that and made a statement saying that there were inconsistencies surrounding Henry's disappearance. Now, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, there are a lot of inconsistencies in this, but they actually said that Henry's wife, Corinne, was the one holding the investigation up. And now this is really weird. So they made a statement saying she is purposely withholding information that we believe could lead to the location and recovery of Henry Mccabe. I feel like we've all been misled. We have an ethical and moral obligation to the community and this organisation to do the right thing. They basically claimed that there was a conversation with Corinne indicating that she knew her husband was alive. This is just really, really strange. I'm not sure exactly what it is that Corinne did that led them to think this. I'd love to know what exactly it was that Corinne said. However, contrary to their belief, the body of Henry Mccabe was actually found on the 2nd of November that same year. He was found in Rush Lake by a kayaker, and I'm not entirely sure what the state of his decomposition was. I'm assuming as he'd been in water for 2 months, he probably wasn't in the best state. This means that the walk from the Holiday gas station all the way to Rush Lake was even longer than we thought. That's not just the 48 minutes to Creekview Park, that's just like another 10-15 minutes added onto that. We can kind of speculate from that voicemail that Henry died very soon after this call was made, and if Henry's body was found in the lake, we can only assume that Henry died in or by the lake, meaning that's probably at least an hour's walk. The New Brighton Police Department released a statement saying that the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's final report shows that Henry died from probable drowning in fresh water. The use of the word probable is very interesting here. It's kind of them being like, it's most likely fresh water, but we can't be 100%, so we're just going to say probable drowning. The weird thing is, Henry was on the phone to his wife saying that he'd been shot, so they all kind of expected to find that Henry had died from a gunshot wound, but this wasn't the case. Henry's body had no outward signs of a struggle or any like marks that would indicate a fight, and he definitely did not have any gunshot wounds on his body. However, even after the autopsy, it remained an open case, even though it said that he drowned. The police still continued investigating. So there are 3 main questions I have about this case at this point. The first one is, how did he get to the lake so quickly? I mean, even if he had been dropped off earlier, it just seems like the timeline just doesn't quite match up there. If the police would sort of tell the public what time the CCTV was timestamped as, it would probably answer a lot of speculation and questions. But considering all we know is that William said that he dropped Henry off at 2 a.m, then he most likely died just after 2:30 a.m. How did he get there so quickly? If he got a lift, who did he get a lift with, and why have they never come forward, unless obviously they killed him? Did he call Corinne on purpose because he knew he was in trouble, or was it just an accidental butt dial? And why was he so insistent on being dropped at the gas station? Of course, again, we're only taking William's word for it here. William has said that Henry was insistent on being dropped there, and so he dropped him there. Now, God knows why you would take your wallet and keys off of your friend because they're so drunk that you can't trust them not to buy more drinks, but you would drop them at a gas station and expect them to be able to walk home in that state. That doesn't quite match up to me. Unless, of course, William is just a bad friend. So let's talk about some theories here. The first theory, of course, is what the medical examiner said, an accidental drowning. So let's say that he did manage to get to the lake in that amount of time and he was alone. If this is the case, then accidental drowning is probably likely. Maybe he was feeling pensive and wanted to have a wander around the lake to clear his head, and maybe he gets out his phone to call Corinne to have a conversation, and just after he calls her, he falls, probably falls into the lake. Now, I don't think it's totally crazy to say that the low growling sounds in the voicemail are actually the sounds of Henry drowning and struggling to catch his breath. Let's say he's standing by the lake and wants to talk to his wife, so he gets out his phone and is dialing Corinne's number, and as he does so, he falls face first into the lake. Now, I can't imagine the water would have been very deep at like the edge of the lake, so maybe Henry was just sort of thrashing around on the ground trying to catch his breath, trying to stand up, but he was so drunk that he just couldn't get his balance. It's also possible that the growling sound is actually just bad signal and it just sounds really creepy. Now, the voice saying stop it at the end here is something that kind of throws everything off a little bit if this is the correct theory. However, there's actually zero proof of this voice ever saying stop it. It's not on the internet, the police have never released it. So we can't say that actually happened for certain. But to be honest, if Henry is just thrashing around trying to catch his breath and then he suddenly like catches himself and he pauses for a second, then he just says stop it to himself, to nobody in particular. Maybe he's just saying to himself like, get a grip, just stop it. I mean, it does sound creepy, it does sound unlikely, but I don't think it's a crazy theory. A lot of people also speculate suicide in this as well, saying that Henry drowned himself on purpose. I don't know what kind of person you have to be to commit suicide and call your wife while you're doing so. Maybe call her beforehand to be like, I love you, and then hang up. I don't think you actually have somebody on the phone whilst you're doing it. And also, I just don't think Henry would go to a lake to commit suicide. It's actually pretty hard to drown yourself. If you're going to commit suicide, there's plenty of other ways I think he probably would have done it. I just don't think that's very likely in this case. Another theory is drugs. A lot of people speculate drugs in this case, saying that Henry got dropped off at the gas station to pick up some drugs, buy some drugs. A little bit of a problem with this is that Henry didn't have his wallet on him. His friend had his wallet and they didn't give it back to him before they dropped him off. I'm assuming they just didn't remember to. So if Henry did go to this gas station to buy drugs, he wouldn't have had the money on him. So you would assume they'd just turn him away and be like, no, but is it crazy to think maybe they were angry and got Henry into their car, drove him to the lake and then drowned him? Is a possibility, I suppose, but also I'm pretty sure some of that would have been caught on the CCTV if that is the case. I don't know, it just seems a little bit far-fetched to me. I don't imagine somebody driving Henry to a lake to kill them. It just seems like a lot of lengths to go to kill somebody when there's other ways you could do it, I suppose. It just seems like a little bit over the top. You would just turn him away and be like, no, you don't have any money, you're not having any drugs. You don't drive them to a lake and then drown them. On the other side of the drugs theory, a lot of people say that Henry was actually very drunk and very high on drugs at the time he died, and so the voice on the voicemail is actually Henry and he's just really like on a bad trip or something. Again, it's all speculation. I suppose it's possible. I don't really see it. Murder is something that's thrown around a lot in this case. Obviously we already kind of mentioned it in the drug theory, but maybe he got in somebody's car, they drove him to the lake, they murdered him. Maybe. There just doesn't seem to be a motive here. There doesn't seem to be a reason why somebody would take him to a lake and kill him. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying there's no chance that that's what's happened, but there's just no motive there. I mean, I think it's quite obvious that he did drown. They sort of said it was probable freshwater drowning and he was found in a lake. So I would say he probably did drown considering there were no like outward wounds on his body. Maybe somebody held his head under the water. Maybe. Even if Henry was drunk, he still seems an unlikely target because he was a full-grown man. I could sort of understand drunk women being grabbed off the street. That happens often. Drunk men is a little bit more unusual. And this leads us on to the next theory about the smiley face killer. Now this is thrown around a lot in regards to drunk men going missing, and it's a theory that's never really been proved. So this theory was thought up by two detectives quite a few years ago, I think. And in a nutshell, it's drunk men, usually around college age, being drowned in canals and rivers, and then wherever they're drowned there's a smiley face found somewhere in the vicinity, either sort of etched or graffitied onto a tree or a fence or something like that. Now Henry doesn't quite fit the MO here. He was significantly older than college age and there was no smiley face found nearby, but you can tell why his case has been linked to the smiley face theory, but I don't think it is what happened. Now obviously a lot of people in this case are very suspicious of William Kennedy, the friend who dropped Henry off at the gas station that night. The big question is, why would he lie about where he dropped Henry off that night? He's always just said that he got confused and forgot, but why would he even begin to drive in that direction? It was nowhere near Henry's house. Maybe Henry realised he was going the wrong direction and like felt a little bit shy to say, so just said, oh, drop me off here and I'll walk home. Maybe. I'm pretty sure William actually knew where Henry lived though. There are definitely a lot of inconsistencies in William's story, but he has been questioned and questioned by the police so many times who do admit that there are inconsistencies, but there's no evidence that he murdered him. There's just evidence that he dropped him off at a gas station. And there's also, again, zero motive there. Why on earth would William want to kill Henry? There's no reason. They were good friends. We're going to talk about animals, possible Bigfoot. Bigfoot is something that I'm going to sort of gloss over here. I don't like to delve into anything paranormal or like conspiracy theories on my channel too much, because that's just a rabbit hole that I would never get out of. So we're going to kind of gloss past Bigfoot, as well as we're kind of going to gloss past animals being the cause of his death in general. I'd be more inclined to believe that there was an animal involved if Henry had external wounds, but he literally had none. So there's nothing to prove that an animal was involved at all. I'm not sure what kind of predatory animals you'll find in Minnesota in sort of city areas. Maybe some of you guys can help me with that. Anything scary enough to sort of make Henry feel the need to go out into the lake to escape. The final theory I want to touch on is that Henry's death could be linked to the civil war back in his home country in Liberia. So Henry lived in the civil war for 14 years before moving to Minnesota. There was quite a strong Liberian community in Minnesota at the time that he died, and I suppose there still is now. Now this theory actually came directly from a leader in the Twin Cities Liberian community, and said that we shouldn't rule out the possibility that Henry's death is linked to Liberia. She said that they would kill without remorse. They've done it for years. 25,000 Liberians live in Minnesota, so if one of them had a personal thing against Henry, maybe something they did back in their home country, then I suppose it is possible, but it just seems like the timings wouldn't match up here. Somebody would have to be kind of following Henry around in order to do this. I mean, think of the coincidence it would be if somebody who has a massive vendetta against Henry would come across him blind drunk at a gas station in the early hours of the morning. It just doesn't make sense. And there's also no evidence to suggest this, but I suppose there's no evidence really to suggest anything other than the fact that Henry drowned. And that is kind of everything I have to touch on for you in this video. It's a lot of speculation, a lot of inconsistencies, nothing really quite matches up. I'm most inclined to believe that Henry did just go around to the lake to wander around and clear his head and ended up accidentally falling in and drowning. There are definitely inconsistencies with that, things that don't quite add up, but I think it's kind of the one that makes most sense. But I would be really intrigued to hear what you guys think in this case, and make sure you let me know in the comments. I'm so sorry if I've got like sweatier and sweatier throughout this video. It's currently 32 degrees outside, which I just googled it, and that's 89 degrees Fahrenheit for my American viewers. And we don't have aircon in the UK. Like nowhere apart from shops has aircon over here, because it never ever gets this hot. In my 24 years, I have never remembered a summer as hot as this one. I cannot deal. But yeah, sorry that was a bit of a tangent. I'm just really sweaty and feel like I need to give you an explanation as to why. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your theories as always down below. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!